Thank you very much. Thank you. Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Slaughter. I currently teach ethics at California State University. Thank you for coming to my talk. Today, we're taking a look at Orc society through the lens of Elias Canetti's Masse und Macht, or Crowds and Power, to see if the armies of the 41st millennium can help us to understand the social dynamics of the 21st millennium. So, Elias Canetti's Crowds and Power, first published in 1960, is a meditation on the role that crowds have always already played in the formation, deformation, and destruction of social hierarchies. Crowds create and kill kings. A man or orc who is part of a crowd is different from a man who is apart from a crowd. Canetti describes the crowd as a force that dissolves individual boundaries, overwhelms institutions, and generates new forms of sovereignty through collective discharge. The orcs of Warhammer 40,000 universe are an alien species whose biology, society, and culture are organized entirely around the mass formation and the logics of mass formation and collective action. Orcoid society, and in particular the mass psychosocial phenomena known as the Waaagh, offers a unique case study in post-human political governance. Orcs, far from being mere comic relief or brutish antagonists, appear as the radical culmination of crowd logic, egalitarian, ecstatic, and violently generative. In a universe obsessed with imperial imperatives, the Orc Waaagh offers a parodic but potent vision of collective power without central ideology. Through this lens, the orcs of Warhammer 40k become not only a satire of militarism, but a site for rethinking Canetti's enduring concerns with identity, power, and the terrifying vitality of the crowd. So the crowd, the mob, the hoi polloi. When we think about the more boisterous types of crowds, we are thinking about an archetype that Canetti dubs the open crowd. It is precisely this sort of crowd that we are talking about today, and Canetti suggests that such formations emerge with the following dimensions. Open crowds want to grow. A bigger crowd is a more powerful crowd, and the more powerful a crowd is, the more invincible the members of the crowd feel. This is quite a beguiling feeling, and those in the crowd greatly desire it. Anyone outside of the crowd is a potential enemy. Everyone within the crowd is your ally. It is this alchemy of the crowd to turn strangers into comrades. This is due to the second dimension of the open crowd, equality. All members of the crowd are simply that, members of a crowd. There are no bosses, no executives, no VIPs. While one member of the crowd might be louder than another, no member of the crowd is louder than the crowd as a whole. The experience of being part of a crowd, of being with others who are with you, is different from everyday life. In everyday life, we fear the touch of strangers. Canetti suggests that, quote unquote, it is only in a crowd that man becomes free of this fear of being touched. The more fiercely people press together, the more certain they feel that they do not fear the touch of each other. The crowd is an embodied concept in Canetti's work. Density is the tactile, bodily condition of equality. Density means that individuals are packed tightly together to the point where their personal space collapses. As the press of bodies increases, individuality blurs. Canetti stresses this is both exhilarating and terrifying. One is freed from isolation, but at the cost of personal distinction. A dense crowd generates a palpable charge of energy. The more tightly packed the bodies, the more immediate the shared sense of momentum and potential. Density does not merely measure the number of bodies, it measures the intensity of feeling. The crowd feels stronger, more dangerous, and more alive the denser it becomes. A crowd that moves with clear direction feels more powerful, more inevitable. Canetti emphasizes that the crowd's potency comes not just from numbers or density, but from its ability to converge on an object, whether this be storming a building, pursuing an enemy, or chanting at a football pitch. Direction turns mass potential into action. Without direction, without a goal, the crowd will inevitably dissolve. As this is antithetical to the crowd, a crowd without a direction will immediately find one, or perish. Growth and density, equality and direction. These are all dimensions within the crowd tends to emerge. But these dimensions are ontologically separate. Growth and density are observable effects, things that can be performed or acted out in space and time. A crowd grows as more people join, swelling its numbers. Growth and density are signs of the crowd, but not its inner essence. Equality and direction, by contrast, are experienced internally by those in the crowd. Equality is felt when the social distinctions collapse, when the student and the soldier feel the same in the press of the bodies. Direction is felt as the crowd's orientation toward the goal, when its members sense that they are moving together towards something. These are not just appearances, but constitutive realities on what it is to be a crowd. Without them, the crowd would dissolve into a mere gathering of individuals. Growth and density are signs of a crowd's presence, but equality and direction are what make it real. You can imagine a football stadium filled with people. Growth and density exist, but the crowd only truly forms when people feel active and act together, chanting, storming the field, or exulting in unison. The reality of the crowd is not statistical, but rather affective and existential. Now that we know a little bit of something about crowds, let's turn our attention to orcs. While there have been a number of codices written on the subject, I think we can do no better than to turn to the works of Majos Khazad-dîn Yalamagasa. The orcish mind is something that many of my esteemed colleagues will argue barely exists. They will maintain that the orcs and their kin are little more than instinctive animals, carrying out tasks and functions in which they have evolved to specialize without independent thought, somewhat in the matter of colonial insects. In this matter, as in so many others, is in fact the magi biologists in question who are acting mindlessly. Orcish society is considerably more dynamic than our own. My learned peers may deride it as chaotic if they deign to accept the truth of such a statement, but even that would indicate limited understanding on their parts. The simple truth is that an orc is far more capable than an unaugmented human of recognizing when a situation is not to their individual benefit, and taking action to remedy that fact. It might be argued that this cannot be true, since orcs will readily throw themselves into perilous situations with little regard to their own safety, or indeed, in a combat situation, tactics. The key issue here is that this is a highly desirable state of affairs for an orc, for whom the outcome of battle is of substantially less importance than experiencing said battle in the first place. However, should an orc boss, big boss, or a war boss, the closest approximation of their very loose command structure, not provide their followers with the appropriate level of excitement, combat, and plunder, in other words, the things that their followers desire, they can expect an attempted coup from within the ranks of those followers. This is a universally observed truth, whenever it has been possible to study the behavior of orcs with any degree of accuracy over a period of time. For orcs, this would be unthinkable. So far as the xenos species appears to be concerned, although senior orcs are larger than their subordinates, no orc, no matter how large, could maintain authority over its fellows without providing them with what they want. Indeed, since orcs gain in size the more that they fight, being an orc, a large orc, indicates that you fight regularly, and therefore following you is likely to bring other orcs into combat. So, when orcs fight, they get bigger, tougher, stronger. Is this because they are simply exercising their muscles? No. When orcs fight, they feel bigger, they feel stronger, they feel tougher, particularly when they win. For humans, this feeling of confidence might make you a more daring warrior, but for orcs, the psychic gestalt field that they produce makes these beliefs true. An orc who feels tough is tough, and each additional orc adds to this effect. A boy in a mob is much the same as a man in a crowd. Both feel stronger, more dangerous, more invincible, and become stronger, more dangerous, and more invincible. And if you get a few mobs of boys together, all oriented in the same direction, then buddy, you've got a Waaagh on your hands. The Waaagh is both a battle cry and the name for the psychosocial energy that orcs produce. It manifests most intensely during mass conflict. As orcs gather in mobs, their psychic resonance builds into a feedback loop that enhances their strength, coordination, and aggression. The orcs themselves experience this as a sort of ecstatic unity, an urge to fight that borders on religious rapture. For Canetti, the discharge is the aesthetic moment where individual differences vanish and everyone in the crowd feels the same. In Orcs, this is literalized as the Waaagh. As they shout Waaagh together, their psychic field surges, fusing them into one social organism. The discharge isn't just metaphorical, right? It has tangible effects. Weapons fire straighter, vehicles run faster, weird boys channel warp power. The Waaagh call is thus the audible sign of Canetti's discharge, individuality erased in a shared roar that makes reality conform. Canetti emphasizes that equality is the most profound experience inside the crowd. Differences of rank, class, or wealth vanish. In the Waaagh, knobs and boys alike are swept along in the same tide. Even grots, the undercast slave race, so often bullied in orc life, find themselves carried along. All orcs feel equal when the Waaagh takes them. The only distinctions that matter are temporarily dissolved in the collective fight. This is why orcs can tolerate crude hierarchies. The Waaagh provides a recurring experience of absolute equality. Crowds gain their intensity from bodily proximity, the press of others that collapses boundaries. Orc mobs demonstrate this principle perfectly. The closer they cluster, the stronger their psychic field. This density doesn't just produce feeling, it produces power. Orcs literally become more effective the more tightly packed they are. Canetti's metaphor of the crowd as a single body becomes, with orcs, a metaphysical reality. Canetti insists that a crowd needs direction, an object, an enemy, a destination to persist. In orcish life, war bosses embody direction. They don't simply lead, they are the focus of the Waaagh. The Waaagh field also tends to orient around external enemies, a fortress to storm, a fleet to smash, a planet to conquer. Without direction, mobs collapse into squabbles. With direction, they cohere into apocalyptic force. Canetti describes how the survivor arises out of the crowd, the one who remains, who embodies its force and claims power from it. War bosses are survivors par excellence. They emerge from endless brawls as the one left standing. Their survivor validates them as leaders, not by divine right, but by visible proof. The Waaagh crowns the war boss as the living survivor, a tyrant generated by the crowd itself. In the closing sections of Crowds in Power, Elias Canetti turns from the dynamics of the crowd to the structure of power that follows in its wake. At the heart of this is the survivor, the one who remains after others have perished. For Canetti, survival is not simply biological. It is symbolic and ritualized. The survivor stands above the dead as the one who has endured the quote-unquote final comparison. This experience, he writes, gives birth to domination, quote-unquote. The survivor sees himself as chosen. The death of others is the source of his power. This concept has a direct and profound resonance with the war bosses in orc society. War bosses do not inherit authority. Rather, they assert it through violence, charisma, personal might. Their power is always contingent and performative. There's no throne, no institution. There's only the fact of survival. Every war boss is a survivor in Canetti's sense. The biggest, meanest, loudest orc who has outfought, outlived, and outshouted all of his rivals. His status is visible, materialized in size, right? Orcs literally grow larger with victory, and reinforced by his proximity to the ruins of those he has crumped. In Canetti's schema, the survivor becomes the seed of future command structures. He is the original priest king, right? The proto-despot. The survivor's gaze is what terrifies others into obedience. He lives not with the crowd, but rather after it. The orc war boss similarly emerges from the crowd, but is no longer of it. He directs the Waaagh, but is not consumed by it. Well, unless a challenger proves otherwise. So, Elias Canetti describes crowds in these metaphorical, anthropological, and phenomenological terms, right? As energies, as forces as transformations of bodies. These were never meant to be literal, right? But Warhammer 40K's orcs collapse the metaphorical into the material. What Canetti describes metaphorically, orcs literalize. The psychic field of the Waaagh is not a poetic description of collective effervescence. It is a material force, right? What for us is sociology, for them is ontology, right? In studying orcs, we confront Canetti's ideas not as allegory, but rather as speculative anthropology. Equality in Canetti's open crowd is fleeting, right? Hierarchy always reasserts itself. In the Waaagh, however, equality is recurrent. Every gathering dissolves difference before producing its survivor. Unlike human crowds, where equality is temporary and fragile, orcs experience it as a recurring structure of existence. The Waaagh continually resets them into a condition of radical sameness. Orc society is thus a perpetual cycle of egalitarianism and domination, an endless alternation between the ecstasy of the crowd and the tyranny of the survivor. For orcs, this is the permanent rhythm of their society, a cycle of sameness, discharge, and survivorship that endlessly renews itself. For Canetti, the survivor is the seed of command, right? For orcs, survival is the only law of legitimacy. The war boss is whoever still stands. If human polities cloak survivorship in ritual and law, orcs, on the other hand, strip it bare. They reveal, in a sort of grotesque parody, that power for orcs has always been survival by other means. But if Canetti is right, then our own systems differ only in degree, not in kind. Power everywhere is survival by other means. So, that's what you humies call a crowd, huh? All this talk about being equal and dense and surviving. You're all equally dense, you humies. But us orcs, we don't need no big books to tell us the truth. We know it in our teeth and in our fists. The crowd is the Waaagh, and the Waaagh is the crowd. All the orcs are the same when the shout goes up, all bashing and smashing, till only the biggest boys left standing. That's the war boss. That's the survivor. And then we does it all again. You can write your fancy words, but we orcs, we live it. And now there's only one thing left to say, and I hope all you gits best say it with me. Waaagh! Okay, thank you very much for attending my talk. I hope you had fun. All of my references should be on the next slide. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you all next year.